Hello and welcome to the webinar for Data Analytics webinar on scheduling. My name is Andrew and I will be hosting the webinar today. This webinar will cover the basics of building scheduling queries. There will be a chart and this video will be made, both the chart and the video will be made available later for you to review at your convenience. If you have any questions or suggestions, please email them to support@pcreducator.com. The Data Analytics tool, or DAT, is a comprehensive system for creating on-the-fly filters, exports, dashboards, mail merges, email merges, queries, and reports supporting advanced database concepts with left joins, logical conditions, aliasing, aggregates, pivots, predefined reports, parameterization, and flexible security access. Whenever you're building a DAT report, there are a number of steps that you should consider. The first thing is determining what sort of information you will want to extract for your DAT. The next is planning a workflow for how to access that data throughout the different tables and connect them together. As part of this webinar, we do have a chart which will be made available to you later. This is the chart outlining the scheduling tables for the DAT. There are several common tables that are of primary importance. The first one would be the student info, which would be your student information. This would have all your basic student information and student name, grade levels, that sort of information. Of importance is the status by division table. So whenever you want to get a status for an enrolled student, you should always reference the statuses by division. This is particularly important if you're using a summer camp where the statuses may be different and you may have students that are enrolled specifically for summer camp only. Part of this chart, you'll see that it's different from the other charts in that we have a red box underneath various tables with the name of different fields. These fields are key fields, and if you're familiar with the Common Mistakes article for the DAT, these are the kind of fields you want to make sure you add a condition for when you're using these tables. So in the case of statuses by division, there's a school ID you can specify and a school year. In the case of school year, for fields that are school year as opposed to academic year, school year 0 is current year, school year 1 is next year. And for academic years, the years will be the full year, 2019-2020, for instance. So for the vast majority of the scheduling, you'll see everything references school year, which would be a 0 or 1, 0 for current year, 1 for next year. Along with the students table, there's the teachers table, which would have the staff that would be teaching course sections. There's a rooms table, which would again be associated with course sections, and the rooms will be specific to a division, so it has a school ID. The courses table, which links to departments and as well as course sections, student courses, and selections. The courses are school year independent, but they are specific to a school division, along with the departments similarly restricted to a specific school division. There are other tables in the DAT that are support tables for the scheduling in general. So the selections table refers to the courses that a student is selecting, that they're requesting and they may or may not receive. The student courses table refers to the courses that a student has been enrolled into. The course sections table is the course section itself. It contains information about who teaches the course section, what room the course section meets, what period code is associated with the course section, determining its class schedule. Those are the primary pieces of information in the course sections. Next, you'll see there's a course section rooms table. This is an override table where you can as part of the scheduling, you can override which room a course meets during a particular day of cycle. So while the course section might normally meet for the science lab room, maybe on day of cycle 3s, which might be a Wednesday in your case, you can switch which room it meets for, and that's stored in this course section rooms table. Then across, on top of that, there's the class schedule, which is often commonly referred to as blocks, or I'm sorry, commonly referred to as period codes. So course sections have period codes or linked to the class schedule. The class schedule, or period codes, is then linked to multiple blocks. And then finally, in between blocks and course section rooms, there's a block rotation, which is the daily rotation that a class meets in the calendar throughout the year. So these are all the primary tables that would be involved in building a DAT query, a data analytics tool query for the scheduling. All right, so now let's switch back, and what we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how to modify one of our existing reports. In this case, I'm going to modify the admin class list report. These are predefined reports under the PCR imported category, and we provide these reports to everyone that you can, so that you can use them, modify them. The key is if you do make modifications and you want to keep those modifications, you should save them to a new and different category, because we will replace the reports that are present under the PCR imported category. So right now I'm going to go ahead and edit the class list report. So right now we can see that there's student information. It's then linked to the teachers as advisors. It brings in course sections, student courses to course sections, and then links to courses, rooms, and teachers. And you'll notice that the teachers, rooms, and this teacher are italicized. This means that they are joined with or without, meaning the student may or may not have an advisor. This course section may or may not have a room, or may not have a teacher. And if we review the results, we can get a handle on just what sort of results we have. And you'll notice as we go down the rooms, this first lunch class does not have a room. And then starting down here, we have English 6 meets in the room MS5. So that's the way it currently works. But what we want to do right now is, if we look at this, we'll see that if we look under courses, we'll notice that in here, there's a school ID for courses. So we should be restricting these courses to a particular school division, at least most commonly. This report currently operates across all divisions. So we're going to make this division specific. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the courses, and I'm going to choose to add a condition for school ID. In this case, I'll say equals 1, which is the upper school, and for this database. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the parameterize checkbox here to make this a parameterized condition. So now when I save this and I go to results, we'll see that first of all, it's pretty apparent that the courses are, according to the grade level codes, are upper school. In fact, one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link the courses to the school info table and include the school name so that we can see that for sure. Now when we look at results, over in the far column, we can see that right now this is all PCR upper school. Now up here at the top, you'll see there's a place where we have a number of parameters. School year was already a parameter, semester was already a parameter, but we've added a new one called school ID, default value of 1. I'm going to change this to 2, and then click Apply New Parameter. School ID 2. Let me check, I probably should, that's the problem. When I added school info, it automatically added a school ID equals 1 for my convenience. In this case, we want it to be parameterized. We don't want it to have that as a default. Now when we go over here, click school ID 2. I actually totally let's see, courses, that one's parameterized school ID 1 there. Save, results. Yeah, so right now I have it as applying parameter school ID 2. If we go back to school ID 1, we'll see it has upper school. If we apply it as school ID 2, if I can type, parameter 2, middle school, parameter 3 would be lower school in this case. So you can see we can change the school. Instead of having to modify the report by going to query and changing the conditions, we can conveniently modify the parameter right here to the school ID that we want. And this allows us to reuse the report and make it more convenient without having to modify conditions. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the same report, and I'm going to include some information about the blocks, including the daily schedule. So let's take a brief look here. If we want to include the daily schedule information, we can see that in order to get to the blocks, we're going to need to include the class schedule, and it attaches to course sections. So I'm going to do the plus next to course sections and connect to class schedule. I'm going to remove that for the time being because we already parameterized that on the courses. And then I'm going to link to class schedule blocks. And then finally, I'm going to link to blocks. And now for the blocks table, I'm going to do a couple of different things. I'm going to display the day of cycle and the block code. And then what I'm going to do is again, I'm going to get rid of the school ID. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a condition on the day of cycle. Yeah, day of cycle multi-select. I'm going to pick days 1 through 5. So that corresponds in this database to Monday through Friday. Add condition. All right. And now I'm going to save, and I'm going to just take a quick look at my results. And what you'll see here is that it's listing out the courses, and then there's an additional row for each day of cycle. But what I want to do in this case is I'm going to go back to fields, and then I'm going to change this to a pivot aggregate. So this day of cycle, you'll see that pivot aggregate is available, and that's because we did it as a multi-select condition. And in this case, I'm going to do the min block code. Min block code. Save it next. And now we'll take a look and see what the results are. And what you'll see is that, did I do min block code or count block code? If I did min block code, yeah, min block code. What we'll see is that the courses have what block they're meeting for that day of cycle. Let me see. This doesn't quite seem right. I'm also going to make sure that I have school year 0 on this because, again, back on here, school year is kind of important for this sort of table. So I'm adding school year 0 condition. Yeah. Oh, and that's the other problem. I was wondering why it's all ones, but you can see I'm still showing lower school ID 3. So I'm going to switch this back to the upper school. And now here's what I was really expecting. We can see which blocks that the different courses are meeting. So we can see, for instance, that block 1 like this English 2 meets block E for a couple of the days, but it's missing on day 2. The same thing with English 1. For this student meets block A for most of the days. So this is a demonstration of using the pivot aggregate column to turn those day of cycles into columns. And then, so the day of cycles 1 through 5 became columns, and then the block code here became the data that's showing in here. Theoretically, you could have a course that meets for two or more blocks per day, and it'd be up to you whether you wanted to see the min block code or the max block code, but this is an example of with the min block code. All right. So let's see, next item on the list I'm going to do is, so this was modifying an existing report. So again, if I wanted to save these changes, when I go to save, I'd want to make sure to use a different query group than the PCR imported, because otherwise there's a good chance that those changes will be lost at some point when we will update the list of reports and make it and update any information on those reports. So you would choose a different query group. Maybe I'd choose scheduling query group and call it my class list. And then when you're saving the report, depending on which roles you select, it'll either be visible only to you if you choose no roles, or if you select roles in general for the report, anyone with those roles would be able to see the report as well. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a new query. In this case, what we're going to want to do, I'm going to have class totals and show the capacities and remainders using calculated fields on the report. So to start with, I'm going to build my query. What do I need to do to build my query for courses with class list and totals? So for that, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to start with the courses. I'm going to link to the course sections, and then student courses to get into student info, and then I'm going to want to link in the student info for status by division to get current students with a current status of enrolled. So let's start with the courses. That'll be under scheduling, courses. So in this case, I'm going to want to have the course name, course ID. I may as well include the short course name, because often with scheduling, you'll want the short course name. You also want to make sure you include the ID fields when they're available. So in this case, like course ID, and I'll demonstrate the reasons why in a moment. You'll also want, in this case for courses, we go back to courses, we see there's a school ID specific. So we will have a condition for school ID, and I'm going to default it to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and make it parameterized. So that I'll be able to change it later if I want. Next, we're going to link courses to course sections, because we want a list of course sections with their capacities and availability. So linking to course sections, and checking again on course sections, I see that there's a school year. In this case, I'm going to use school year equals 0 for the condition. If you see something like this, you'll see there's condition school year 0, 1, and then 103. This indicates that there is a what-if scenario, and that's all that means. But normally, you'll always be using school year 0 or school year 1. So as the school year condition, I'm going to add a semester condition, because the capacity changes could be based on semester. So the semester condition, I'm going to select section and section capacities for my return fields. And I'm going to go ahead and parameterize semester just in case I want to change that as well. Save this. So after course sections, we will want to get to students, we're going to need to go through student courses, then student info. So I will go ahead and link student courses. And then student info. And to be complete, I could add the school year to student courses, but since the school year is already specified on course sections and it links directly to student courses, it's actually going to use the same school year. Student info doesn't require anything additional, but we do want to make sure we have the statuses by division with the right school ID and school year. So status, we'll link the statuses by division. And in this case, I want status equals enrolled. And I'm not going to worry about the school ID in this case because theoretically you could have students in other divisions, like sometimes you'll have a middle school student taking a high school. So I'm not going to worry about the status is specific to the upper school. I'm just going to say status of enrolled for any division. However, I do want to make sure it is, in this case, for the current school year since that's what I am running the report for. So we'll save those conditions. The other thing I want to do is for the student info, I'm going to include the student ID field. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a quick check of the results to see what we have. So one of the things that I was going to point out, because we included the course ID, and in this case, the student ID, you can see that these have turned into links. And what I can do is using that link, I can open these in a new tab. So ID 26 English 2, I can come over here and look at the course info for English 2 because I included that ID. That ID will also allow certain other things, such as if we save this report, we can make it available as a dashboard element for various locations based on the course ID. If it's a course's dashboard, for instance. Now that we've checked this report, just confirm that it makes sense, I'm going to go back to the field step. Well, actually, before that, I'm going to go back to the column order step, and I'm going to reorder this. So let's make this into a little bit better order. So I'm going to do course name, short course name, course ID, section, section capacity, student ID. Now, when we look at the results, a little bit more readable. Okay. So now on this field step for the student ID, we have this use aggregate. What we're going to do is we're going to do an aggregate on the student ID just to get a count. So I want to see a count. In this case, I'm going to do a count distinct. It doesn't really matter, but basically what we're doing here is we're getting a student total for this, for the courses, for the semester, and for the school division. And we're going to take a look at the results. So what we can see is here on English 1, there's section 1, we have 2 students. English 1, section 3, we have 1 student. And now I'm going to do some additional things because we have the section capacity here and we have our counts here. I'm going to add a new column for the available capacity. So in this case, we can see that this column name is E. This column name is F, so I'm going to add a column E minus F and add a calculated field, and this will be available spots. Save and next. Let's take a look at these results. And now we can see that the section capacity, 20 minus 2 is 18, 20 minus 1 is 19, 20 minus 16 is 4. We can see that these are indeed the available capacities, and what we can see down here is we have some overcapacity classes. So 20 with 21 students, we're actually overbooked. Now, just as a sanity check, we can see section 1 says there are 2 students. Section 3 says there's 1 student. If we go back to the course profile, what we can see here is that indeed for the current year for section 1, we have 2 students. Section 3, we have 1 student. And this is just a quick way we can double check and see, yeah, our query is working the way we want it to. So this is a handy little trick doing the available spots that allows you to modify fields, add fields. There's a number of different options. And if we look again at the fields options, you can see you can use multiplication, division as well. And it allows you to come up with different statistics. So now that we've reviewed the results, let's go back to the results. We can also then change the school ID. So let's change, maybe we want to look at the middle school. And here we switch to the middle school, so we can see that we have classes like English 6, 7, and 8, Math and Science 6 and 7, and just as easy as that, we're now looking at a middle school variation of the report because we parameterized the school ID. All right. So now let's do another report here. In this case, what I'm going to do is student selections by department. So I'm going to do a new report. Switch back to here. Do a new report. So I wanted to do this one because it includes additional tables that are separate from the ones we've already discussed. So we've covered reports that use blocks, block schedule, course sections, selections, rooms. So in this case, well, we haven't done selections yet, and we haven't really done departments yet. So I'm going to start with departments. I'm going to link through to courses, to selections, to students. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm actually going to get, well, we'll save it for a surprise to see what exactly I'm doing. So let's see. I can either start with departments or I can start with student info. I think I'll actually start with student info. Either way, it's just a matter of ordering the columns differently. So student info, I'm going to grab, let's see, I'm going to grab my student information, student ID, student last name, make sure I include the student ID, and save. And then again, because I'm dealing with students, I'm going to want to link to the statuses by division to make sure I'm only dealing with enrolled students. So statuses by division. And we're going to have school year. In this case, I'm going to do school year equals 1 because this would really, because we're dealing with selections, this would be a next year style report. And school ID, we'll get rid of it because again, if someone's in middle school and selecting a next, selecting something for high school, and it's maybe outside the grade level ranges, we want to make sure that they are included in this report. So school year equals 1. Now I'm going to link in selections. So that is students to student selections. Add plus. Student selections. Well, it's actually just called selections as per the naming here on this chart. Selections. Selections has a school year. So I'm going to set the school year equal to 1. Save. Now from selections, we go to courses. And in this case, this school ID would be important because we're interested in the statistics for this specific division. So I am going to parameterize that selection, and I'm also going to include the course ID. Save. And then I'm going to link from courses to departments. And then for departments, it's also just a school ID, and it's specific to the course. So since departments are only associated with one or all courses associated with a department, I've already specified a school ID for the courses. The department will also already be school ID equals 1, so I don't need a school ID condition in this specific case. So in this case, I'm going to include the department name, department ID. Or actually, no, I'm just going to do department name. We'll see why in a minute. So save. Now, when we do the results, we'll see, okay, I'm getting data. We got the student first name, student ID, student last name. Things are a little out of order. Let's change the column order a little bit. So I'm going to do last name, first name, student ID, and then the rest. And what I'm going to do is, in this case, I'm going to do another pivot aggregate and show you why I'm creating this specific report. So going back to do the pivot aggregate, we need to do a multi-select. So in this case, we have the field department name, and I'm going to do a multi-select for, in this case, I'm going to pick what I consider the major departments. We'll pick English, we'll pick math, we'll pick science. Because what happens is when we're doing a multi-select, we pull back a certain set of the results that you can check off at a time. And then let's also do foreign language. So yeah, that seems like a good set. English, math, science, and foreign language. We'll add those and save. And now when we go over to fields, here we have the option now to do a pivot aggregate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pivot aggregate on the count of the course ID. So what this report will tell me as a result is it's going to show me each department and then how many times a student has selected a course within that department. So now when I run this report, we can see that Abby here has selected an English class, a science class, and a foreign language class, but she has not selected a math class. Both students should be taking a math class, so this report tells us that Abby's selections are incomplete and she really needs a math. Down here, then we can see that the next Abby Stezen has everything she needs selected, so her selections look good. What this report does, or the way you could use a report like this, is you can see whose selections are incomplete and who needs to fill out more of their selections. And one of the things to note about this specific report, and I just want to cover a little bit more details about the pivot aggregate, is we selected the course ID field, so it normally would appear, but then we're doing a pivot aggregate on the course ID for departments. So the way the pivot aggregate works is it's going to take this column and then put it under each department column, and each department value, every department name that appears is going to be made into a column, and then the corresponding course information will be put under each department accordingly based on the pivot aggregate we've specified. So in this case, it's a count. There are a number of other options in terms of what you can do in terms of aggregates, depending on the type of number you're working with. So you could do averages. That would be useful if you're processing something like the number of actions and doing some action statistics, or if you're performing, maybe you're doing something with finance and doing numbers, but the options include averages. You can do counts, and averages, of course, have to be on something that's numeric, and IDs are numeric. Counts can be done on any type of, pretty much any type of field that's available in your list. Max would be the maximum values appearing, so you could get the max course ID if you wanted to. Mins are the reverse. If you're doing a max or min on an alphabetical field, those fields will be picked based on the alphanumeric sorting. So, for instance, if you have your blocks, this is important consideration. If you have block codes that are listed as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 10, those block codes are actually, even though you put in numbers, they're actually not numeric fields. And so if you were to do a max on your blocks and you have something that meets day 10 and day 9, technically the 9 is the maximum because 1 is alphabetically before the number 9. And then finally, there's the idea of doing sums, which is useful mostly for financial information, or if you could do it also for if you're summing, like, there are various things you can do summing for. Mostly it would be for numbers if you're doing donations or finance and financial information. So I just want to cover the pivot aggregate in a bit more detail to demonstrate that. And finally, we can check again to see that we can change the new parameter. And if we switch now to the courses for School ID 2, this is a little bit different because what happens is our departments would have to share a name between the two different school IDs. So if the courses would have to be School ID 2, these would be students who are selecting courses that match this naming convention. So they'd have to use the same naming convention in the middle school for the departments. That is That works because we did not actually include a school ID for the departments. If we're using school ID 1 and then we switched the courses to school ID 2, we'd get no results. So that covers the query for the pivot aggregates. And that covers, let me see and make sure I've covered everything I intended to cover. There we go. So we covered parameters, did class list of teachers and their classes, and we modified the schedule. We did the class list with available seating, and we did the student selections by departments. So that gives you a sample of the various reports that you could create through the data mining tool and how it works with these joins through these tables and the fields that are available for these courses. Again, a reminder that these red blocks are important and would be important for any sort of conditions you're trying to add to make sure you include those to avoid common mistakes, lest you get information that you're not expecting or beyond what you're expecting. Otherwise, if you have any questions or comments about this webinar, I'd ask you please, we certainly welcome any comments or suggestions. If you email them to support@pcreducator.com, we'll be happy to review them, take a look. If you have any ideas for a scheduling report that you would like us to include as a general report and make it available under the PCR imported reports list, we welcome any thoughts or suggestions for these type of reports. And if they seem like a good idea, we'll be happy to see about creating them and deploying them to all schools and making them available. Otherwise, I thank you very much for joining the webinar. It seems I flew right through all the information today. I did want to remind you that this webinar and this chart will be made available at some point. Check the campus homepage for any notices, but we will make both of these available on the video available on YouTube and this chart available. It'll actually be available as an article that you can access through our website. And I thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday.